We're going to listen in.
Wayne County Executive Warren Evans. And it gives you a sense of the kind of regional cooperation we have, but I'm really pleased to see Oakland County Executive Dave Coulter here. And Macomb County Executive Mark Hackle. This is a different day when the folks in this region come together, and we were all just at Dave Coulter's State of the County. We support each other because I think we see how we are tied together. And one last thing that I just want to mention, I know City Council was introduced before I got here, and I get asked the question about this tradition of having City Council on the stage. You don't see it in a lot of other places, and people ask where it came from. And it actually came for the first year that I was in office, when we came in and there was an emergency manager and bankruptcy. And it truly was Detroit versus everybody. We bonded together, we got the city out of bankruptcy, and we went to Lansing and ended up with legislation that allowed us to get out from under state control with 3 straight years of balanced budgets. We've been working together, and I don't intend to offer much advice to my successors, but I hope they'll continue the tradition, because Detroit's recovery has been because of this partnership. Thank you for what you have done. And so for those joining us on TV or on the internet from Detroit or beyond, you are hearing this from the Hudson's Detroit building, a magnificent building that literally rose from the rubble, soaring skyward in the city of Detroit. In this country right now, you're hearing lots of toxic political division. In this room, you're going to hear the story of the people over the last 12 years who came together and became partners to rebuild this city into one of the great American success stories. So let me tell you about the history of this building, because it means a lot to Detroiters. The Hudson store that sat on this site opened in 1911. It was once the largest retail store in all of America. And through most of the last century, it was the place of celebration when Detroit had something to come together on. And at Christmas, children would line up for hours to visit the 12th floor, where you would see Santa Claus. My mom took me and my brothers. And when you walked into that floor, you thought the city of Detroit was the most magical place in the world. This site touched our hearts. And then in 1969, Hudson's merged. And in 1983, they closed the store. And it left a hole in this community. It took 15 years before the city demolished it, and it sat there for 30 years until Dan Gilbert came along and had a plan. And even in the midst of COVID, he brought this new building out of the ground to now the 2nd tallest building in the state of Michigan. Didn't it turn out beautifully? And I want to take a minute to thank Dan for hosting us, because if you notice some of the promos, we were at Hard Hats. They're still doing the work to move General Motors in later this year. The building's still under construction. But this is the latest in 15 years of Dan's success when he first announced he was bringing the Quicken employees into the city. It includes the book tower that got renovated after having been abandoned for 25 years. But he's done more that you may not know about. He came to me several years ago and said, do you know how many people are being foreclosed on that are landlords, that are collecting their tenants' rents and scamming them and not paying the property taxes? He says, I want to pay the property taxes, take the property, and turn it over to that tenant who's paying the rent every month. And now there are 1,500 former renters, including this gentleman, who are now homeowners in the city of Detroit because of the program that Dan started. And he and Jennifer started the Gilbert Family Foundation, committing $500 million, and they went through and found 12,000 families who were being current on their property taxes but had a debt hanging over them that was jeopardizing their situation, and they went and paid off the back taxes of those 12,000 people. And I just want to say this. In 15 years, Dan has changed the course of the city the last 5 years. He's been doing it under immense personal tragedy, and yet not for a single time did he stop worrying about the welfare of the city of Detroit. And I just want to say tonight, Dan, how much you mean to everybody in this city, and say, God bless you, thank you for everything you've done. And the story of Hudson's is a story about a lot else in Detroit. At the same time Hudson's was opening, Detroit was putting the world on wheels. The Packard factory alone employed 40,000 people. And when President Roosevelt called on Detroit to build bombers and tanks, we became the arsenal of democracy and turned the tide of World War II. But then, as soon as the war ended, it seemed like America began to turn its back on Detroit. And just a few years later, the first suburban shopping mall in America opened up at Northland, and people started to exit. And then, just 4 years later, that plant that built the plane engines and the tank engines that won the war was shut down, and those thousands of people were out of work. And starting in 1956, and the next year, Detroit began to lose population. And every year since 1957, we watched this population decline. And this is not a statistic. For those of us who grew up here and lived here, you had to see the pain of what was taken away from us. We lost our auto plants. We lost our shops. We lost our movie theaters. Most of all, we lost our neighbors. And it was year after year, decade after decade, of pain. In all that time, I felt like I wanted to do something about it. And I know there are a lot of people felt the same way. And then a fascinating thing happened in this country. In 2011, 2012, as the Great Recession started to ease, young people in America moved back to cities. It wasn't predicted, but it was happening in astonishing numbers. City populations were growing up. States that had big cities were growing. And this seemed like it should be even Detroit's moment. Even Cleveland was booming in 2011, 2012. Except not Detroit. At a time that should have been our moment in the city of Detroit, half our streetlights were out. 20 recreation centers had been abandoned and were closed. Our parks were shut down for the entire summer. Nobody even bothered to cut the grass. Detroit was becoming America's vanishing city. And I looked at that and thought, there's no reason we shouldn't be growing like the other cities in this country. But in the 10 years before I got elected, 200,000 Detroiters moved out. And they left behind 47,000 abandoned houses. This is what the people in the city were living with. And can you imagine the children walking down the street every day and looking at this, what this said about the way that we were valuing them. And so here's what I found, though, as I'm watching. The more the city declined, the more the political leaders fought with each other. And it was the mayor and the council. It was our elected officials and the unions. They fought with Lansing. They fought with the suburbs. And then I realized that when everything is going down, the way you get reelected is blame somebody else. And whoever's best at blaming somebody else wins. But it doesn't do the city a bit of good. And so I thought, I was running a hospital system down the street, that maybe there was a different approach. And as the city declared bankruptcy, in July of 2013, I was running for mayor, and I did it in a different way. I went to 250 homes every night talking with neighbors. And you know what? They didn't want to fight with anybody. They just wanted their streetlights on. They wanted the police to show up. They wanted real change. And I said to them every night in those living rooms, if you're voting for me, us versus them, politics is over. This is going to be a city where everybody's welcome and everybody's valued. And I can't tell you how many political people said, oh no, you don't have a chance. That'll never work. I'll never be able to thank the people of the city for the confidence in me, the kindness from the first House party in 2013 through 2 elections, to the way that you treat me every day. It has been a very special experience. And when we got in here, we got out of bankruptcy less than a year after my election. But as everybody pointed out, bankruptcy got rid of our debt, but it didn't solve our problems. We still had the country's highest unemployment, violence, and blight. You had to address those problems. And many talked about a bleak future. When you have an unemployment rate near 20%, how are you going to climb out of it? But in all those living rooms, I kept meeting people who were unemployed. They wanted to go to work. They just wanted a good job. And I thought, the only way we're going to get good jobs in a hurry is to go back to Detroit's roots, the manufacturing base. And so I went to Mary Barra and Mark Royce at GM. I went to Bill Ford. I went to Sergio Marchionne at what was then Fiat Chrysler. And I said, look, the next time you land a supplier plant, just give me a chance to propose. I will show you we can get it approved here. We can get it built here faster than any place. And when the experts heard what I was saying, they sneered at it. And they said, I don't know what he's talking about manufacturing. Detroit's got no future in manufacturing. But we didn't pay a lot of attention to the experts. And I took what everybody said was a big problem, our vacant land, and I turned it into an advantage. I said, I've got the site for you to put in your plants. And in 2016, we landed a Ford supplier, Flexingate, the first new auto plant in 20 years. And I thought we'd be cheered, but again, they sneered at us again. The national media said, rare, somebody's building something in Detroit. But then an interesting thing happened. When Flexingate went to hire their first 500 jobs, 16,000 applicants showed up. And the manufacturer said, whoa, they've got a city where the mayor and council are working together to approve things fast. They've got the land, the permits are moving, it's close in our supply chain, and they got the workers. And all of a sudden, nobody was laughing. And we became the center of new manufacturing in this country. And so we demolished the 40-year abandoned Hudson motor plant and landed a new 700-employee Lear seating plant on that site. And then we took the abandoned Kettering High School site and landed a 600-employee Dakota dashboard plants for the Jeeps. And then on the abandoned Southwestern High School site, Sylvester Hester brought in his seating plant for the Ford trucks. And then we beat out 5 other states in all their cornfields and landed a Jeep assembly plant on Mack Avenue. And they hired 4,000 Detroiters for good-paying jobs, moved 4,000 families to the middle class in one swoop when they opened that factory. And the GM Poletown plant, which was on the verge of closing, never had more than 1,600 workers when they were making gasoline-powered cars, converted over to Factory Zero, and now they've got 4,000 employees making electric Hummers and Silverados and Sierras. And I know nationally electric vehicles aren't growing as fast as they can, but we are very fortunate to have the main factory here, and it's actually employing twice as many people as when they made gas engines. And the 30-year abandoned AMC headquarters on Plymouth Road is now the site of a new parts facility for Factory Zero, employing more than 200 workers. And then the other companies saw what was happening, because on case after case, my partners on council line, we had some issues, we worked through them, they got approved without drama. People are saying Detroit's a place you can bring a business, and we started to see a lot of others. The state fairgrounds have been closed and abandoned since 2011. In 5 years, we built a major business park anchored by Amazon, employing 2,400 people. Can you imagine the difference in 5 years in one location? The Illich family built 2 new office buildings on Woodward, bringing in hundreds of jobs. The Roxbury Group took the abandoned David Whitney office building and, way ahead of their time, converted it to residential with beautiful apartments and hotels. And the Torgos built the new Huntington Bank headquarters. Instead of the bank headquarters leaving the state, they came in here and brought 600 jobs to downtown Detroit. And that train station, abandoned since 1988, Ford just reopened it in June as an innovation center, just moved in 1,000 workers. Bill Ford made a commitment to this city, and next door started a new lab that's got 140 startups and lots of young people. This is what we are building. And I want to talk today about Detroit City Council, because the reason, and this is something maybe you can learn nationally, business doesn't want to invest with this chaos. Business wants to go with this predictability. And we had an agreement with City Council early on. We are not going to give cash to developers. We're not going to write them a check and then wait and see what they do. But what we will do is we'll give them discounts on new taxes. And that was going to be the Detroit philosophy, and a lot of places are doing it differently. But we won't write that check. And so when Bill Ford proposed renovating the train station in 2018, that building had paid basically nothing in 30 years. And we knew that Ford had an option. They could have gone out to a green field near the University of Michigan in remote Washtenaw County. And it's a lot cheaper to build new there than a renovated train station. And so we offered them a discount. And we looked at it. If Ford paid full city taxes over 35 years, they would pay $400 million to level the playing field with the farmland. We offered them a 25% discount. They were going to pay us $300 million for that vacant building. And in spite of that, City Council had to take grief from the people, the voices of division, going in and saying, oh, you're giving $100 million away to wealthy people. And to their credit, members of council didn't run for cover. They said, that's not true. We're not paying Ford. Ford's paying us $300 million, and they're going to bring 1,000 jobs into the center. And we stuck together and got this done. And with that reputation, the city continued to come back. And we did it. We did the most important thing. We put our residents back to work. They wanted jobs, and they came back to the lowest levels that we'd had in decades. And you know those tax discounts we gave? Bad financial decision for the city, right? This was the plan that City Council and I agreed to with the bankruptcy court when we exited bankruptcy. And we committed to 2% a year in annual income tax growth. Now, see the problem with that? At 2% a year, you barely can pay your employees cost of living. How are we going to deal with all that blight, all those rec centers we need, all the parks, the police and fire? So what happened? When we landed all of those companies and all of those jobs, you know what our actual track record was? 7% annual growth. We are now this year getting $470 million, $150 million more a year than the bankruptcy court predicted when we exited bankruptcy. That's what leadership does. And so what does that mean when you got that $150 million? People think somehow, and people say, oh my God, what happens when you're not mayor? You know, you got this federal money. That's nonsense. Our finances are better because of all the people working and living in the city paying the taxes. This is real gain. And that's what Wall Street said because they understand it. They gave us 10 credit rating upgrades and our first investment grade credit rating since 2009 because this city is growing. And it means financial security for Detroit's future. For anybody here saying, oh my God, what's going to happen in the next downturn? This is a different day and different leadership because together the mayor and council have put aside $550 million in reserves. We know there are going to be blips up and down. That's a given. But we've got $550 million in cushion to be able to ride that out. And I'll tell you what else it means. It means we're making enough money, we can share some of it back with the taxpayers. Okay? A lot of other cities are having to raise their taxes right now. But 2 years ago, we did a property tax cut. And last year, we did a property tax cut. And this year, our property values are gaining so fast, we're going to do a 3-mil property tax cut, a $150 tax cut for the average Detroiter because you stayed in the city of Detroit. In 2014, Detroiters were living in the most violent city in America. But here's what else happens when you bring back jobs and you have taxes. You can invest in your public safety. Because at the time, our officers were leaving in droves. In 2014, our cops were making $15 an hour. And they were working mandatory 12-hour shifts. They had fewer cops since the 1920s because nobody wanted to be here. But because we had this success, we turned around and gave our officers a well-deserved $10,000 pay raise. And then we put 350 more officers on the street, and 99% of our positions are filled today because we're paying them competitively. We backed them with the latest technology. And we had partners. County Executive Warren Evans led an effort to deal with the court backlog, along with Sheriff Washington, the courts, the prosecutor, and the corrections department. We cleared out the COVID backlog of gun cases and got people who should have been locked up. And then a great partnership with the U.S. Attorney's Office, because none of us were fighting with each other. You never read a story in the paper about the county executive and me fighting over the criminal justice system. We had problems on our side. He had problems on his side. We sat in a room and we worked them out, because that's the right thing for our residents. And then we put $10 million into America's most community violence intervention program. Now here's, again, what's different about Detroit. Following the murder of George Floyd in 2020, there developed a movement in this country, defund the police. And in Detroit and other places, there were debates. You should defund the police and fund community violence, right? It has to be one or the other, because that's how we are in America, right? You got to fight with somebody. Except that was wrong. We needed more police, and we needed more community violence intervention. So in the city of Detroit, we did both. And we put $10 million into these groups, and here's what they do. We know in these neighborhoods you have different gangs and groups that beef with each other. By the time one of them shoots the other one and the police show up, it's too late. But there are people in the community who are respected and are trusted, and if they can get these individuals to sit down together and make peace, we can reduce the shootings. At least that was our theory. And our theory is now drawing national attention as the most successful CVI program in the country, and I will show you why. And before I do, I want to thank Councilmember Fred Durhall and the Gun Violence Task Force who helped us put this program into the first place. Councilman, thank you. So here's what we did. We mapped out all the shootings over the last 5 years. Former Chief White is here. He worked with the time Deputy Mayor Todd Bettison. And this map, the red, is where the gunfire occurs. And it won't be a surprise to Detroiters. There are sections of this city that are very safe, and there are sections of the city where our children couldn't go to sleep at night without hearing gunfire. And I sat with these groups, and I said, okay, this is going to be different from midnight basketball. You say you have the relationships. We're going to give each one of you a zone. You see those little green zones? Each one of the 5, we started with 6, but we ended up dropping one of them. Each one of the 5 was responsible for diffusing the arguments within each of their zones. And we said, we're going to measure you. I got to introduce them to metrics, which I can tell you today they're all experts on. But at the time, metrics was a new thing. And you want to see how they did the last year? Look how the green zones are today. This is what our 5 groups, when you couple the violence with the police, you keep people safer. And so I want to expand it even more, right? And I thought we had it. Last June, the state of Michigan appropriated $75 million statewide for locals to expand public safety. It was going to be more money for law enforcement in Grand Rapids, in Lansing, in Flint, in Saginaw, in Dearborn, Ann Arbor. It got passed. We're going to expand police and mental health services, make it a permanent public safety trust fund, so it's there every single year so cities can have law enforcement strategies. Except after they appropriated the money, they forgot to pass the implementing legislation. Money's been sitting in an account since June. It's now March, and it's still sitting in a bank account in Lansing. The city of Lansing was going to hire 12 cops in October to put them on the street. They can't do it because the money is still sitting in an account. And we say, this isn't right. And so I'm really pleased to say that we're pushing back. Governor Gretchen Whitmer has been phenomenal in leading on this. Representative Farhat and Harris are sponsoring the bill. Senator Sylvia Santana has fought for this nonstop. I am really excited that the new speaker, Matt Hall, has joined on board. And Representative Tate, who's here, Representative Whitsett, Representative Mueller, Representative Whitwer, they're all fighting to get this money passed. And when we do it, let me show you what the city of Detroit's going to do with our money. We are going to expand those green zones to every single area of the city that still has violence. Can you imagine what happens if every place we have disputes, we have the trusted people in the community talking? What could we do? And so, last year, we had the fewest homicides since 1965. Somehow, I never can get excited about this. There's 200, a few of our residents being killed every year, but I look at that and say, 200 of our neighbors lost their lives. Okay? That is not acceptable in this city. And so I see Chief White sitting over there. He had an historic number last year in crime reduction. But we have a new chief now, Todd Bettison. Right? And Todd Bettison is measured on metrics, and his job is he better outperform his mentor, James White. So his first quarter numbers are in. And how is Chief Bettison done in the first quarter versus 2 years ago? As of yesterday, homicides down 38%. Shootings down 53%. Carjackings down 56%. Okay? Now, Chief Bettison, we're the first one to tell you that his real report card comes at the end of the year and we have a ways to go. But none of us is feeling good about the fact that 200 people died last year. And we are going to keep trying to intervene in every single neighborhood and every single situation so that no child in the city goes to sleep at night hearing the sound of gunfire. We also use the revenues to rebuild our fire department and increasing our response rate. We bought new ambulances, hired more EMTs, and we cross-trained our firefighters who had always been strictly firefighters. They have all now been cross-trained as medical first responders, a great commitment that they made. And as a result of that, what had been the worst response time in America last year beat the national average at 7 minutes and 30 seconds. Thank you to the men and women of the fire department. And with this extra revenue, we made a decision to put more money into homeless services. In 2023, we had $6 million. Last year, we doubled it to $12 million. And this year, increasing it again to $14.5 million. In December, for the first time, we opened 110 immediate shelter beds. Anybody living on the street has an immediate bed, no bureaucracy. The police, the outreach workers will take you there immediately. And we've just decided, with council support, to double that to 220 immediate shelter beds. But with the Curry-Williams family, here's the tragic lesson we learned. Having the beds doesn't mean anything if the outreach workers don't reach the people in need. And so with council support, we have just put 2 outreach teams on the street, 24 hours a day, working 8-hour shifts. They are now searching not just the normal places in the alleys and the streets. They're going to look for families in parked cars. This is the commitment we are going to make. We are one of the few cities in all America that doesn't have tent cities. The beds are there, and now we are going to make sure that our outreach workers don't leave any stone unturned so this city never again has to suffer the tragedy that we did earlier this year. And I want to thank Councilmember Mary Waters, who's been at the forefront of increasing the homeless funding every single year. Also proposing a $20 million increase in funding for DDOT, adding 45 buses, 63 new drivers, 24 new mechanics, increasing the daily buses from 178 to 220, the most in years. And thank you to Councilman Scott Benson, who's been our biggest advocate for buses every step of the way. We're also investing in our residents, and there are jobs today for every Detroiter looking for work. We know that there is a softening in the manufacturing market, and I hope the President and Canada work out the issues soon. But the underlying economy in Detroit is strong, and we are there for you if your job is insecure. 9 centers in every corner of the city. In just the last 3 years, we got more than 2,500 Detroiters full-time jobs through the training and placement in Detroit at Work. And one of the things I'm proudest of is 1,200 of them had been unemployed for more than 6 months. People have been giving up hope. We put them into training programs with good paying jobs. And I want to thank Councilmember Coleman Young, our sponsor at Jumpstart, in the beginning of the program. We have lots of good paying jobs in lots of places. And here's one of my favorites. JP Morgan Chase was outsourcing their call center. I said, how about you insource it to Detroit? And I'm really glad Peter Scheer is here because they said, we're going to try that. They created $24 an hour jobs with people doing these call centers from home. Their numbers from Detroiters beat their national standards on their insight centers, and they're now up to 150 people that they are hiring in the city. Peter, to you and Jamie Dimon, thank you for what you've done. And I want you to hear now from one of those 2,500 success stories, Isaiah McGee Robinson.
I had probably about $50 in my bank account. The Skills for Life program, it brought me the knowledge and the training that I needed to go forward and start my own company. My name is Isaiah McGee Robinson, and I participated in the Skills for Life program through Detroit at Work. I was born and raised here in Detroit, Michigan, graduated with a political science degree. I applied to several companies, and everyone hit me with the same thing. You had the education with no qualification. So when I found out that I could get this added value to my life at no cost to me in virtually a few months, I didn't think twice about it. Upon my acceptance into the electrical program, I went to school 3 days out the week, went to work 2 days out the week. They're paying for it. All you have to do is show up with a clear mindset and an attitude to win. So after graduating from Skills for Life, I started my own company, Gold Member Electric and Remodeling. I signed a contract with Motor City Match as a contractor for them. I know for a fact it's going to help my city. Skills for Life program allowed me to give back through the people who gave back to me that invested into me. If you could show someone the door to knock on is one thing, but if you can give them a key to that door, it's a whole different thing. And that's what I think the city of Detroit is doing with the Skills for Life program, providing the keys for youth and citizens overall of all ages to open the door that they never knew was there.
All right. That's the kind of talent in the city. We've got 20 employers, hired 14,000 Detroiters, and most of them are still hiring now. We have a job for you. Go to Detroit at Work. But I've been focusing for 12 years on what I think is the greatest legacy gift we can give our children. And that's return the Detroit Riverfront to the public. All right? 12 years ago, the city had planned to build private condos on the best riverfront property next to Milliken Park. And my first month in office, I took that condo plan and I scrapped it and pushed it back to open up the riverfront to the people of this community. And then we've been very fortunate. The Detroit Riverfront Conservancy has done a great job in taking property that looked like this and turning it into areas that look like that. And the base of Belle Isle, making it look like that. They did a great job and they hit a goal of renovating from bridge to bridge, but I wanted to go beyond that. I wanted to make the riverfront available from border to border. I wanted to go to the far southwest and the far east where they think they've been forgotten. And so we decided to go to the area in southwest Detroit near the Ambassador Bridge, which was closed at the time. And there was a warehouse property. This is how Detroit uses riverfront property, right? For years, they built warehouses on it. But I convinced Matt Maroon to knock the warehouse down, sell us the property, and today, under that abandoned land, is one of the most beautiful parks in all of Michigan. And on the far east side on Jefferson Chalmers, the neglected A.B. Ford Park is being rebuilt right now as a spectacular waterfront park. The Riverfront Conservancy is partnered with David Egner and the Wilson Foundation, and this long abandoned industrial land west of the RenCen is being built right now and will open this year as a spectacular Ralph Wilson Park. And this is the one that's always bugged me. The Uniworld site near Belle Isle. got knocked down, but abandoned for 40 years. And for 40 years, they had a plan to build 2,000 luxury condos. This is the way Detroit used to do it, right? Take the Riverfront property and give it to private interests. And I wanted to stop this. And fortunately, after 40 years of not getting it done, 2 weeks ago, City Council canceled the contract. We retook the property, and we canceled the luxury condo plan. Because I believe the Riverfront belongs to the people. And instead, Arn Tellem and Tom Gores are leading a group to make this Detroit's finest recreation site, an outdoor complex for flag football, soccer, and lacrosse. And because Sheila Hamp and Steve Hamp are involved, I'm pretty sure this is going to be the center for the flag football leagues in the state of Michigan. How does this look like for a Riverfront plan? And so, they're also going to build a huge indoor youth sports academy for basketball, volleyball, and dance on the riverfront. So imagine a riverfront with Wilson Park on one end, the sports academy on the other end, and in the middle, we have the beautiful Renaissance Center. Anybody see a problem? And we have to finish the job. And I want to talk to you today honestly about the Renaissance Center and what we're trying to do. It was built as a partnership between Mayor Gribbs and Henry Ford II. And people think it was GM's, but GM didn't move in until 25 years later, and it never worked well for them. Tenants have been moving out for years. But since COVID, the RenCen is 80% empty. And Mary Barra and Mark Royce came to me and said, we need 200,000 square feet for headquarters, not 2.5 million. And to Mary's credit, she said, we are committed to a Detroit headquarters. We are staying in the city of Detroit. She says, but we cannot be in a 2.5 million square foot Renaissance Center. And from my standpoint, I couldn't really argue with the logic of that. GM's been a great partner. Not only did they double the size of Factory Zero, they cited 4 more parts plants in the city of Detroit in the last 5 years. They put thousands of Detroiters back to work. So it isn't that they don't want to help. And so I had one request of Mary Barr. I said, don't just sell the buildings. She said, what? I said, let me tell you the history of the landmarks when businesses leave them in the city of Detroit. They sell to whatever developer buys them. The Hudson's building was bought by a Canadian group. We're going to restore the Hudson's building. They went belly up and it ended up demolished, and it took Dan Gilbert 40 years to fix it. When the train station closed, this fella from downriver said he was going to turn it into a casino. He was so broke he couldn't afford security, so he and his German Shepherd patrolled the place till he went broke and the train station got devastated. The AMC site, Chrysler sold it to a developer who said he was going to fix it. It turned out he was illegally scrapping it, releasing toxic chemicals in the neighborhood, and ended up spending 2 years in federal prison for polluting the neighbors. This is the history. And of course, the Packard plant. Been allowed to deteriorate for 69 years when Mayor Cobo didn't deal with it in 1957, and it did enormous reputational damage to the city of Detroit. And you remember this character? He kept doing interviews saying he was restoring it. I was watching the building deteriorate. So I sued him to take the property, saying you aren't keeping it up. And he went on TV and said the mayor's being mean to me. And people were believing him until that bridge behind him collapsed on the Grand Boulevard. At which point we got control of the property. And I'm proud to say that after 69 years, the Packard plant is history. We finished the demolition. And so I said to Mary Barra, here's the other thing. There's 275 workers, mostly Unite Here union members, working in that hotel. If those office buildings all go empty, the hotel's going to close. These people will be out of work. We need you to work with us on a plan to find a real developer who can fix it. And to her credit, she agreed to work with us on a long-term solution. And I wanted to save those 5 buildings. I look out my window in the mayor's office every day. I love those 5 buildings. But I'm going to be a mayor who faces reality. And here's what I found out as we reached out to everybody who might do this. Here's what we learned. The RenCen has got 2.7 million square feet of office space. All right, we'll go find tenants. Turns out southeastern Michigan has 60 million square feet of vacant space. There ain't anybody in Michigan coming. So that's okay. We can go to the Midwest. We'll go bring more in. And it turns out the Chicago market has 50 million square feet of vacant office space. Nobody is going to fill the offices. the RenCen is actually 9 times bigger than the train station. Can you imagine that? That's what we're dealing with. So I said, okay, well, could we make it into housing, right? People say they just convert it to housing. Like you can stick up a high-definition TV and a bedroom set. But here's the problem. Think about these floors. The office floors have 1 bathroom per floor. If you're going to put in 10 apartments, you need 10 bathrooms and 10 kitchens. You've got to run plumbing. And when you try to go through the ceiling, it is poured concrete on top of steel plates. You have to fight through 39 stories of concrete and steel. And everybody said it is far cheaper to build new apartments than to try to renovate a 50-year-old office building into housing. And here's the biggest problem of all. The towers are separated from all the other downtown activities. We have to depend on young people coming back to work, coming back to live. But they want to be on Woodward in Michigan where the action is. And the Renaissance Center, as you all know, was built walled off from the city. Nobody wants to be in a location walled off. And I thought to myself, I'm going to end up being as bad as these other mayors. I'm not going to solve this problem. Some of my colleagues up here are a little nervous about that, in case they come next. But then, we couldn't even find new tenants who wanted to come into this building. And then Dan Gilbert calls. And he says, I've been working on an idea. He says, I don't know if you're going to like it or not, but I want you to look at it because I think it's the only thing that can work. And here was his idea. We could save 3 of the towers. The main tower would be the hotel. And now that hotel is going to actually have a view of the water instead of the other office towers. We'll make an office tower on the right. We'll make an apartment tower on the left. We'll build 20% affordable housing. And I thought, this keeps Detroit's image. And actually, if you look at it from a number of angles, you can't see more than 3 towers at once anyway, right? And so I thought, this has the potential to work. But Dan says, but of course, there's a problem. Nobody wants to be in the 3 towers isolated from everything else going on. He says the only thing that works is I have got to build a huge attraction right on the site of the Renaissance Center, or this is going to fail. And so he said, so here's what I want to do. He wants to build a 1/4 mile, Michigan's finest family and entertainment destination, all across the river, right? To rival Navy Pier as a tourist destination. And he says if we do that, then we have a chance to make this work. And so I said, all right, that sounds good. And so how much public cash is it going to take to start this project? Everybody know the answer? None. Because in Detroit, we don't front money. We aren't the other places. I don't pick on anybody, but we don't front money. We'll give you a discount. And we said to Dan, you could have a discount on all the taxes. And he said, that's fair. I'm willing to do that, but here's a problem. We need legislation in Lansing because we need to discount the city taxes and the state taxes. And transformational brownfield legislation has been around since Governor Snyder. It's how this project got done. It's how Henry Ford is getting done. It is how the city of Lansing is building a $300 million project with a 25-story high-rise they're using, the transformational brownfield. And what brownfield means is instead of building out in a greenfield and chewing up farmland, you take an older site and you give a discount to reinvest there. Who wants all this farmland all chewed up with new development? Okay? In Grand Rapids, the transformational brownfield, they're building up a visionary thing, Grand Action 2, a new amphitheater, riverfront housing, soccer stadium. It's spectacular, the leadership in Grand Rapids. We want to have the ability for that same deal on this site. And the interesting thing is, as we started this, turns out, who's our ally? Somebody I would not have expected. Sterling Heights in Macomb County. They have a landmark. It's called Lakeside Mall. It's closed and it's now being demolished. And they have a vision to do something special, to create the Lakeside City Center, 2,300 housing units, retail and restaurants, and they need the cap on the transformational brownfield lifted so they can do a project too. So you have, again, an alliance that started between Macomb County and the city of Detroit saying, let's be able to do these discounts because this is the Detroit Riverfront today. And this could be the Detroit Riverfront for future generations. It would be as fine a waterway as there is in America. But Detroit's biggest battle for the last 12 years has been the neighborhoods. and the 47,000 abandoned houses. I thought we could bring every neighborhood back, and we started by demolishing at rates faster than anybody in the country. 29,000 houses, those red dots that we've gotten done since I've been here. But to me, the real test wasn't how many we could knock down, but how many we could save. So we set up an auction site where we auction them. And in 11 years, we've sold 15,000 houses, 12,000 rehabs already complete and families moved in. Like this house on Atkinson, which today has a family that looks like that. And this house on Delta looks like this today. We've got places where whole streets were abandoned and now whole streets have been saved. This is what we're doing. And when we started to move the land bank houses, private houses like this one on Boston Edison, that can't be saved, right? Here's how it looks today. This is the way our neighborhoods are coming back. And in 12 years, we're removing the blight of abandoned houses. When we started, 47,000 owned by the land bank. 2019, we're down to 20,000, and as of today, we're down to 2,900. By the end of the year, we will be down to 1,000 vacant houses owned by the land bank. We're moving the blight. And I want to take a minute to thank the unsung hero who for 12 years has volunteered her services, never been paid, but the chair of the Land Bank Authority, Erica Ward Gerson, who has led this effort from 47,000 down to 2,900. The city of Detroit, Erica owes you an enormous debt of gratitude. And instead of selling to speculators, which Detroit used to do, we sold the side lots to the neighbors. 25,000 side lots, right? And so they enlarged their properties. They built playscapes for their children. And then Councilmember Mary Sheffield, president, came along and she says, we got lots of lots who aren't next to somebody's house. She created a multi-million-dollar grant program where not people from the outside, neighbors could propose renovating the parks in their neighborhood. And here's what's happened now. On 4,000 lots, the DeSoto Ellsworth neighborhood built a community garden, right? The Warrendale neighborhood built a community park. This is what's happening over and over. Maria Salinas and the Congress of Communities not only built a park, they built a whole neighborhood resource center in the vacant house that was there. This is what is happening with our neighborhood beautification program. 100 projects already done, 50 more being built. And I want to say thank you to the 600 block club and community groups that have led the efforts in their old neighborhoods. You want to tell them nothing good's happening in the neighborhood, these 600 groups are the ones who have transformed their city, and thank you to every one of you for your service. And so the neighborhoods all across the city are being linked by Detroit's largest neighborhood investment in history. And you know what it is, the $220 million Joe Louis Greenway. All right, I got a bike rider out there. We took out abandoned railroad lines and are building 28 miles of beautiful parkway. We cleaned out thousands of abandoned tires and replaced them with beauty for our children. And the entire loop is going to complete it citywide, enhancing the value of every single neighborhood that it touches all around the city. This is the kind of community we're trying to build. And so we also added rec centers. Matthew Stafford, we still like him. He and Mitch Albom built a beautiful rec center at Say Detroit at 7 and Van Dyke. We built a Kemeny rec center in Southwest Detroit. James Tate came to me and said the library was going to be demolished. And he convinced me not to demolish the library and build it into a community center, which now happens to be known as the James Tate Community Center. And it is, he was the one who saved it, and it's well-deserved. Roger Penske donated $5 million when we built a new Lennox Center in Jefferson Chalmers. The Chandler Park Dome is open in the spring for folks on the east side. And Mayor Mike Bloomberg, for 12 years, has given the city support in the background on everything we've needed, from city services to census counts and public spaces. And he is most responsible for something that you would all recognize. He realized we should close Woodward and build Spirit Plaza. Which is now somehow the center of Detroit's outdoor yoga and dance activities, and is one of the most beloved parks in the city. And Mike, we appreciate everything that you have done for us. And this fall, we're going to be celebrating on Dexter the opening of the Helen Moore Recreation Center. I also want to say thank you to the vibrant clergy community. And you're noticing the story tonight. All the people it took. Are you amazed how many different people it is that have brought the city back? But Reverend Jim Holly, who helped build the senior apartments for formerly homeless on Woodward. Merritt Park, Bishop Andrew Merritt and David and Jonathan are taking vacant land across from their church in Grand River and building a park and a community center for the folks on the west side. Reverend Wendell Anthony is launching the Freedom Point Memorial on the Riverfront with Wayne County Community College to remember the history of the Underground Railroad. Bishop Edgar Van is leading a new affordable housing project in the North End, and Bishop Charles Ellis wants to take young people who have been in foster care, who aged out and have nowhere to go, and build housing for them at the Brewster site. This is what our clergy community is doing. I should probably, what Bishop Zachary Hicks is doing on the Lower East Side, what Reverend Larry Simmons is doing in Brightmoor, what Keenan Knox is doing in Ravendale, I shouldn't start, but our congregation, our clergy, are a huge part in bringing this city back. And we are not proud of anything more than what we've done on affordable housing. In 6 years, 92 projects, $1.3 billion in new affordable housing that we're building. This is a case, again, where the mayor and city council have stayed united. And I want to thank council members Johnson and Callaway and Waters and Santiago Romero. When we got that American Rescue Plan money, they insisted $200 million go to this project. It significantly jump-started the effort. But here's the thing that every one of these council members has insisted on. We don't want to have a city where the poor people have affordable housing and the wealthy people are over here. We used to have those high-rise, and they didn't work. And so this council's insisted we're going to build housing for people all income in all neighborhoods. We're building affordable housing and open it around the old Tiger Stadium field. We built La Jolla Gardens across from beautiful Clark Park. We built in District of Detroit, where Chris Illich is renovating historic apartments right across from Little Caesars Arena. Cliff Brown built the brook in the shadow of the new train station. Eddie Carrington opened the ribbon on the beautiful area in East Warren, and I'm really glad, because if I had to hear from Letitia Johnson one more time about when the ribbon was going to get done, this was her project from beginning to end. And Brush Park Apartments just opened across from Ford Field and Comerica Park, affordable housing across from the stadiums. This is the kind of city that we're building when you work together. 12 years ago, people were moving out of Detroit, and it was the far rural areas that got all the new housing. SEMCOG issued a report last year. You know what city in southeastern Michigan had the most new housing units? The city of Detroit. Right? Now they're building in the city, and we're beating the Pittsfield townships where they're building on the farmland. That's what happens when we work together. 12 years ago when I was sworn in, those who were here will remember I said, please don't move out. Give us time. Our property values were in the tank. Well, last week we got a report card, and the University of Michigan just found that homeowners in Detroit have gained $4.6 billion in wealth in the last 10 years. If you stuck and stayed, you got the most benefit. And here's what their finding found. That last year alone, $700 million in gain in value. Anybody who said, oh, it's already gone up too much, I shouldn't buy last year, you guys missed it again. That total values have gone from 4.2 to $8.8 billion in 1 decade. Can you imagine? Anybody who was in the stock market, you'd have been better off buying housing in Detroit. And more than 70% of the gains went to black homeowners. And that's important. This isn't new people coming to town who are getting the benefit. This is the people who stuck and stayed, the people who stayed the longest, the people in the lowest income areas have gained the most because we are building a city where we are valuing everybody. And so in 2024, we accomplished what a lot of people thought was impossible. For the first time since 1957, the population of the city of Detroit is growing again. We grew so much, even the Census Bureau could count it this time. And I want to finish with a special thank you to the 9,000 City of Detroit employees. When we started out together, you had your retirement cut, you had your health care cut, you had your pay cut, and you went home that Christmas with your children saying, are you going to have a job? And I'm really pleased at what's happened with you. 12 straight years now, No layoffs, no cuts. We've been building together. And I don't think a day goes by when somebody says, what happens when you leave? Are things going to get worse? And I want to show you today why. Detroit is going to get much better for 5 years. This has been about a lot more than me. There is a whole partnership that has done this. But here's what I know, that on Grand River, the new University of Michigan Center for Innovation is rising thanks to a $100 million contribution from Stephen Ross. That's being built right now. The $2 billion Henry Ford Hospital complex is under construction. It's just being built right now. It is going to transform everything around Grand Boulevard. Benny Johnson is just moving his new auto parts plant to the State Fairgrounds. Those jobs haven't arrived in the city yet. Greg Jackson and Richard Hosey are in the middle of renovating the Fisher 21 plant with 435 new apartments. Those folks haven't moved in yet. The Roxbury Group is renovating the 15-story Lee Plaza on Grand Boulevard, renovating 200 new apartments. Detroit's new J.W. Marriott Convention Hotel, how does that sound? Is being built by the Torgos and is rising right now on the river. Is going to open up all kinds of conventions in the city that never had them before. And the 47-story Hudson's Tower right here hasn't even opened yet. I want you to think about that. We have enough construction and projects that's going to carry this city for the next 5 years. That's because all of these people have been working together. It hasn't been one person. If I've done one thing, it's I've gotten people to work together instead of fighting with each other, because the turnaround was never that far away. And so I showed you before, and I'm again talking to our employees who are worried about your long-term prospects, about the fact that we've gained 7% a year for 11 straight years. You can see we dipped in the COVID year, we came right back up. But if we just keep going for the next 5 years, you're going to be looking at $660 million, another $200 million in revenue. And the parts of the city we haven't gotten to yet, and there are. You're going to have more days like we had last April, when all of America celebrated 775,000 visitors, no incidents. And you think we can't top it? 24 months from now, we're going to have to top it. And we all need to be working on it right now. Because in 24 months, we're going to have even a bigger event. The eyes of the world will be on us when the Final Four comes to the city of Detroit. And I will be sitting in the audience as a guest and not as the mayor. But I'll be cheering, because here's what I know for sure. Like the sign says in the window in downtown, nothing stops Detroit. God bless you, and good evening. All right? Thank you. All right. All right. You guys ready? All right. I'm coming to watch next year.
Yeah, all right. Great job.
All right. All right.
Great job.
Great.
Great job. Awesome.
All right. Good. Okay. Thanks. All right. Good job. All right. Good. Okay. Thanks. All right. Good job.
All right, for those of you who've been watching with us, thank you for tuning in to this coverage of the mayor giving his final State of the City address. At certain points, this felt like a love letter to the city that has built his career to this point. He talked about the monumental wins, but also the losses that the city has overcome, everything that he's been able to accomplish in his term as the 75th mayor for the city of Detroit. We're going to continue that coverage for you later on CBS News Detroit at 11. We'll also have more for you on our website, cbsdetroit.com, the CBS News app, and Pluto TV. Again, thank you for joining us. We'll see you later.